I had never done the school run before. Work took up practically all of my time from Monday to Friday, but in the last week of the summer holidays, my wife's mother passed away. She had gone down south to support her father and help with the funeral arrangements, which left me to hold the fort. As much as I miss her, it's been nice to spend so much one-on-one time with Hilda. She is the spitting image of her mother, and her likeness doesn't stop there. She has the same sharp wit and an emotional intelligence way beyond her 6 years. I suppose with me always being at work and Hilda being an only child, it makes a lot of sense. They spend a lot of time together, especially over the holidays. Hilda was happy to give me directions as I drove her to school. I do know the way, of course, but I enjoyed playing along with the idea that I didn't. So first day of year 2, I teased. She turned and frowned at me. I could tell exactly what face she was pulling without taking my eyes off the road. What? I laughed. It's year 3 actually, she said matter-of-factly. No way. When did you get old? She just smiled and turned to look out the window. Daddy. Whenever she had anything to say, Hilda always had to say my name first, then wait for my response. I'd told her many times that she could just start talking, and I would know that she was talking to me, but it didn't seem to ever sink in. It was cute, if not a little frustrating sometimes. Yes. Was it dangerous when you went to school? That caught me off guard. Dangerous? Yeah, because of the dinosaurs. She erupted into laughter at her own joke. The sound of it was so infectious. Very funny, I chuckled. Are you looking forward to your first day back? Yeah, kids, brilliant at carrying conversations. What are you looking forward to the most? She didn't answer right away. I could almost hear the cogs ticking. Playing with my friends. Oh, and my new teacher is Mrs. Gibson. Layla says she's the best. Layla is Hilda's cousin on my wife's side. She's in the year above. Won't you miss your old teacher? No, she responded, so quickly that she must have felt strongly about it. She was the worst teacher. I felt a sudden pang of guilt. My own daughter had suffered a year with the worst teacher, and I'd had no idea. How was she the worst? I prodded. She was always cross. She didn't like fun. She told me off when I cried. Oh, that's not very nice. On the last day of school, I played a trick on her. Hilda giggled to herself and shot me a mischievous smile. That's my girl, I thought. It was Charlie's idea, she continued. We were in the art hut, and she went in the cupboard where the pens and paper are, and I locked the door. I laughed. I remembered doing something similar back in my school days. That way, Hilda shouted, leaning forward in her seat, pointing down the road that led to her school. I had seen it coming a mile off, but had chosen to pretend that I hadn't. Hilda was looking very pleased with herself. I parked as close as I could to the school gates, which was not close at all. My wife had complained about the school drop-off before, but it was even worse than I'd imagined. I walked Hilda down the pavement and to the school gate. I gave her a big hug and kissed her on the forehead. Have a great day. I will, she chirped, then ran off to join a line of other kids about her size. I watched her for a while, finding her friends, talking about whatever little kids talk about, always smiling. My attention turned to the teachers. They all looked stressed. They weren't even pretending to be happy about being back at work. Hilda glanced over at me. I gave her a wave and made my way back down the pavement. A group of mums filled the pavement ahead, 2 pushchairs causing a barricade. They seemed engrossed in serious conversation or serious gossip. I couldn't tell which at a distance. As I got closer, I overheard little snippets of information. Mrs. Baker didn't show up to teach the year 2s. She's not answering her phone or anything. I heard she wasn't at the teacher training day either. A friend of mine is her neighbor, and she says she hasn't seen her all summer. I stopped in my tracks. A wave of dread rushed over me. Mrs. Baker, the year 2 teacher, Hilda's teacher last year. I turned back towards the school and marched up to the gates on wobbly legs. The children had all gone inside. I walked up to reception and tried to calm my breathing. Hi, I'm Hilda's dad. She left her coat in the art hut before the summer holidays. My wife asked me to get it be back. I just about managed to get the words out. Yes, of course, the chirpy receptionist replied. It's just around the left side of the building. It's not been opened yet, so here's the key. Just drop it back when you're done. You can leave it open. She smiled a bright, over-friendly smile and returned to her work. It's a coincidence, I kept telling myself as I walked around the left side of the building. The art hut was one of those temporary classrooms, almost like a static caravan, but more basic. The walls were a rough texture, painted navy blue, and it had a flat, felt roof. My stomach was in knots as I approached the door. The keys jingled in my unsteady hand. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight, casting long rectangles across the room. My eyes swept about the place, then focused on the desk. A handbag sat upon its surface. Hilda's words echoed through my mind. I played a trick on her. I locked the door. My heart raced as I looked to what I assumed was the storage cupboard. I walked slowly towards it, my feet barely leaving the floor, my mind expecting the worst and trying to reassure me at the same time. I tried the door. Locked. Please no, I whispered to myself. I turned the latch. The door swung open by itself. The sound came first, the wet thwack against the carpet, then the smell. I leapt back, gagging, covering my face with my hands as my breakfast sprayed out from between my fingers. As much as I didn't want to look, I couldn't look away. She was curled in a ball, holding her knees to her chest. I guess she had been leaning against the door. Her skin was brown and leathery, wrapped tightly around her bones. Her white summer dress was stained with large, wet blotches of yellow and brown. She was dead because of my poor, sweet, innocent Hilda. A childish joke with severe consequences. I sobbed uncontrollably as I burst back outside. What would I say? What would it do to Hilda if she ever found out? If I tell the truth, everyone will know. If I lie, if I just so happen to discover the body while looking for Hilda's coat, then what? It wouldn't take long for questions to be asked. Who locked the cupboard? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I work as a social worker for the County Adult Protective Services Division. My job consists entirely of stepping into situations that other people would rather ignore. I deal with severe neglect, extreme hoarding, cognitive decline, and most commonly financial exploitation. When an elderly person has a steady pension and a house that is fully paid off, the worst elements of human nature tend to surface. Usually, it is a distant relative who moves in to help out and ends up draining the bank accounts. It is a miserable, exhausting profession, and it teaches you very quickly to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. The file landed on my desk on a late Tuesday afternoon. The referral was classified as an anonymous tip from a concerned neighbor. The details were sparse but alarming. An elderly woman, a widow living entirely alone on the far edge of the county line, had not been seen outside her home for nearly 6 months. She used to maintain a large vegetable garden in her front yard, but it had completely overgrown with weeds. The neighbor noted that the woman's monthly pension checks were still being cashed at the local bank. They were being deposited by a younger man claiming to be her grandson, and occasionally by a woman claiming to be her daughter. According to the county records attached to the file, the elderly woman did not have any living children. Her only daughter had passed away decades ago, and she had no grandchildren. I printed the documents, grabbed my agency clipboard, and walked out to my car. The drive to her property took nearly an hour. The town slowly gave way to sparse, rural development, which eventually transitioned into heavy, dense forest. The road narrowed into a cracked, unpaved dirt path. The trees here grew incredibly close to the shoulder, their heavy branches interlocking over the road to block out most of the late afternoon sunlight. The house sat at the very end of the dirt road, positioned mere feet away from the heavy tree line. The forest seemed to lean over the property, casting long, dark shadows across the rotting wood of the front porch. The vegetable garden was completely dead, choked out by aggressive briars and thick vines. I parked my car in the gravel driveway, shut off the engine, and sat in the silence for a moment. There were no birds singing. The air felt heavy and incredibly still. I stepped out of the car and walked up to the front porch, then raised my hand and knocked firmly on the front door, announcing my title and the agency I worked for. I waited for a full minute. There was no movement inside. I raised my fist to knock again, but before my knuckles could strike the wood, the door swung open smoothly. Standing in the doorway were 2 people, a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s, and a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. They were both dressed in remarkably clean, casual clothing. The woman wore a floral blouse and pressed slacks. The young man wore a plain gray sweater and dark jeans. At first glance, they looked like an ordinary, well-kept family. But as I stood on the porch looking at them, a deep, primal wave of unease washed over my entire body. My brain instantly registered that I was looking at something wrong, even before I could articulate exactly what it was. It was their posture. They stood side by side, perfectly straight, with their arms resting entirely limp at their sides. They were not leaning against the doorframe or shifting their weight. They were entirely motionless, Good afternoon, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am a social worker with the county. I am here to conduct a wellness check on the homeowner. May I come in? The woman smiled. Good afternoon, she said. You are here to conduct a wellness check. She repeated my sentence back to me, but the cadence was off. Yes, I replied, gripping my clipboard a little tighter. I need to speak with her directly. Are you her family members? The young man smiled. We are her family members. I am the grandson. She is the daughter. We provide excellent care. I appreciate that, I said, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. But standard procedure requires me to speak with her in private. It will only take a few minutes. I took a deliberate step forward, pushing my weight slightly toward the threshold. Usually people will naturally step back to allow someone entry. The woman and the young man did not move. They held their ground, standing like statues in the doorway. She is resting, the daughter said. She does not wish to speak in private. I am afraid it is not optional, I said firmly. I relied on the authority of my position, pushing past my growing fear. If you refuse to allow me access to the homeowner, I will have to return with law enforcement. It is much easier if you just let me see her. The daughter and the grandson slowly turned their heads to look at each other. You may speak with her, the grandson said. They finally stepped backward, opening a path for me to enter the house. I stepped over the threshold into the living room. The house was clean, but it was sterile in a way that felt completely unnatural. There was no clutter, no personal items, no mail on the tables. It looked like a staged set. She is in the bedroom, the daughter said, pointing a stiff finger down a narrow hallway. I walked down the hall, keeping my back to the wall so I could keep them in my peripheral vision. They remained standing in the living room, watching me go. I reached the end of the hallway and pushed open the bedroom door. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the light, and the room was illuminated only by a small bedside lamp. Lying in the center of a large bed was the elderly woman. The breath caught in my throat. She was severely emaciated. Her skin was stretched tight over her bones, paper thin and heavily bruised. She looked incredibly frail, as if a strong breeze would shatter her completely. Her eyes were wide, sunken deep into her skull, and darting frantically around the room. I stepped into the bedroom and quickly pulled the door shut behind me, engaging the small push-button lock on the knob. It was a flimsy lock, but it gave me a moment of separation. I walked up to the side of her bed. Ma'am, I whispered gently. I am a social worker with the county. I am here to make sure you are safe. Can you hear me? The old woman stared at me. Her chest heaved with rapid, shallow breaths. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a dry, rasping sound came out. She raised her trembling, bruised hand and pointed weakly toward my clipboard. I stepped closer, unclipped the metal clasp, and handed her the stack of blank agency forms and my pen. She grabbed the pen with a desperate grip. Her hand shook violently as she pressed the ballpoint against the paper. She wrote quickly, pressing so hard the ink tore through the top sheet. She finished writing, dropped the pen onto the blanket, and pushed the clipboard back toward my chest. Her eyes were wide with terror, pleading with me to understand. I looked down at the paper. Written in jagged, frantic letters was a single sentence. They aren't my family. They came from the woods. A heavy, freezing chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, a sharp, hard knock echoed against the bedroom door. Is the wellness check complete? It was the daughter's voice. It sounded incredibly close, as if her mouth was pressed directly against the wood of the door. I moved to the center of the room, keeping my voice as calm as possible. I need a few more minutes. I called out. We are still completing the paperwork. She is tired, the grandson's voice said from the hallway. She needs to rest. You must leave the bedroom now. The brass doorknob slowly began to turn. It hit the mechanism of the push-button lock and stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then the doorknob twisted violently in the other direction. The cheap metal rattled aggressively against the doorframe. They were testing the lock. Open the door, the daughter said. Her voice had dropped its pleasant tone. We provide excellent care. You must leave. I knew that if I opened that door, I was not going to walk out of the house alive. And neither was the old woman. I looked around the bedroom for another exit. There was a single, large sash window on the far wall, looking out toward the front yard and my parked car. I rushed to the window and grabbed the heavy brass latches. They were stiff with age and coated in thick layers of old paint. I slammed the heel of my hand against the wooden frame, breaking the seal of the paint. I threw my weight backward, hauling the lower pane of the window upward. It slid open with a loud groan of protesting wood. The doorknob rattled furiously. "Open the door." The voices outside chanted in perfect, terrifying unison. "Open the door. Open the door." Heavy thuds began to slam against the wood. They were hitting the door, trying to force it off its hinges. The thin wood began to bow inward with every strike. I ran back to the bed. I did not have time to be gentle. "I am getting you out of here," I whispered rapidly to the old woman. "Do not make a sound. Hold on to me as tight as you can." I reached under her fragile frame, sliding one arm beneath her knees and the other around her back. I hoisted her upward. She weighed almost nothing. She was incredibly light, like carrying a bundle of dried, brittle branches. She wrapped her thin arms tightly around my neck, burying her face into my shoulder. I turned back to the open window. The bedroom door cracked loudly. A long splinter of wood fractured down the center of the panel. I threw my leg over the windowsill, balancing the weight of the old woman against my chest. I ducked my head and slid through the open frame, dropping down onto the overgrown grass of the front yard. The impact jarred my knees, but I kept my footing. I turned and sprinted toward my car. I kept one arm securely around the woman's legs, using my free hand to reach frantically into my pocket for my car keys. My fingers fumbled against the metal as I ran across the gravel driveway. I reached the driver's side door. I hit the unlock button on the key fob. The headlights flashed briefly, and the locks disengaged with a sharp click. I pulled the rear door open, carefully but swiftly pushing the old woman into the back seat. I slammed the door shut, threw myself into the driver's seat, and shoved the key into the ignition. The engine roared. I threw the transmission into reverse and looked up through the windshield. The front door of the house was wide open. Standing on the rotting wooden porch, illuminated by the fading afternoon light, were the daughter and the grandson. They were just standing there, side by side, completely motionless. Their arms were hanging limp. Their faces were locked in that same empty smile. They were watching me. I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. The tires spun aggressively against the loose gravel, kicking up a shower of rocks as the car launched backward. I whipped the steering wheel around, aligning the hood of the car with the dirt road, shifted into drive, and floored the accelerator. The car surged forward. The heavy tree line blurred past my windows as I sped down the narrow, cracked path. I checked the rearview mirror constantly. The house grew smaller in the distance. The figures on the porch did not move. I let out a harsh, shaking breath. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I glanced at the back seat. The old woman was lying flat across the upholstery, her eyes squeezed shut, trembling violently. "We are okay," I told her, my voice cracking. "I am taking you straight to the county hospital. You are safe now." I looked back up at the road ahead. I checked the rearview mirror one more time to make sure nothing was following us. The dirt road behind me was empty. Then, a sudden flicker of movement in the mirror caught my eye. It was coming from the thick tree canopy directly above the road behind my car. I saw the grandson. He had moved through the trees. I watched in disbelief as he stepped off a massive oak branch towering at least 40 feet above the ground. He bent his knees and launched himself forward into the air. The physics of the jump were entirely, horrifyingly wrong. It was a massive leap that defied gravity. He sailed through the air, traveling faster than my speeding car, easily clearing the distance between the trees and my rear bumper. He soared directly over the roof of my vehicle. A heavy shadow passed over the windshield, then landed on the asphalt directly in front of my moving car. The impact should have shattered his legs. He fell from an impossible height, hitting the solid ground with devastating force. But he did not stumble or even roll. He landed perfectly on his feet. Less than a second later, a second shadow dropped from the canopy. The daughter landed right beside him, executing the exact same impossible, silent landing. They stood shoulder to shoulder, completely blocking the... I slammed both of my feet down onto the brake pedal. The anti-lock brakes engaged aggressively, grinding and shuddering as the tires locked up. The car skidded violently across the dirt and asphalt, the heavy momentum pushing us forward. We slid to a halt less than 10 feet away from where they were standing. The dust settled around the hood of my car. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, my chest heaving, staring through the windshield. They had not flinched when the car skidded toward them. They stood perfectly still, but the smiles were gone, replaced by a cold, flat expression of mild annoyance. They began to walk toward my car. They walked up to the driver's side door and stopped just outside my window. The daughter raised her hand. She tapped her knuckles gently against the glass. "Lower the window politely." she said. Her voice was muffled by the glass, but the hollow resonance was unmistakable. I did not move. My mind raced, trying to calculate a way out. I could not reverse. The road was too narrow, and the ditches on either side were too deep. If I tried to run them over, based on what I had just seen them do, I doubted the impact of the car would stop them. I slowly reached over and pressed the button to roll the window down exactly 2 inches. Just enough to hear them clearly. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to keep the absolute terror out of my voice. The grandson leaned down, positioning his eyes level with the narrow gap in the window. "You must leave the old woman," he said calmly. "She belongs to us. Open the doors and walk away, or we will kill you." He stated it as a simple, objective fact. "If you touch this car, I will call the police." I shot back, gripping my phone in my lap. "I will have every sheriff's deputy in the county out here in 10 minutes. The daughter let out a sound that was supposed to be a laugh. "The police do not matter," she said. "You should know by now that a normal human does not stand a chance in front of alpha humans like us." Alpha humans. The term sounded utterly ridiculous, yet deeply horrifying coming from her mouth. "We can pull you through this glass," the grandson added. "We can break your bones. We can kill anyone who comes here. We can leave you alive, broken, and no one will ever believe what you say. They will say you lost your mind in the woods." He was right. If I survived, if I told the police that people jumped 50 feet out of a tree and landed on the highway, I would be committed to a psychiatric ward. There would be no investigation. I needed leverage. I looked at the grandson's unblinking eyes. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and forced a cold, hard glare into my expression. "You might be able to kill me," I said, keeping my voice entirely flat. "But you can't kill a server." The grandson tilted his head slightly. The first micro-expression I had seen from him. I pointed a stiff finger toward the top center of my windshield, right behind the rearview mirror. "Do you see that black box mounted to the glass? That is a high-definition, wide-angle dash camera. It has been recording since I pulled into your driveway." The daughter slowly turned her gaze to look at the small black plastic box. "It recorded you standing on the porch." I continued, speaking rapidly, building the threat. "It recorded you landing on the asphalt without breaking your legs. It is recording you right now." I leaned slightly closer to the gap in the window. "And my agency doesn't use local storage. For social worker safety, that camera streams a live, encrypted feed directly to the county government servers in the main office. The footage is already saved. It is out of this car. If you kill me when I fail to check in, my supervisor will pull the feed. They will see exactly what you are. And they won't send the local police. They will send the federal government, and they will dissect you in a laboratory to find out what makes an alpha human tick." Silence fell over the road. The grandson and the daughter looked at each other. The rigidity in their posture faltered. For the first time, they looked genuinely uncertain. They communicated silently, staring into each other's eyes, processing the threat. "I am offering you a deal," I said, seizing the hesitation. "You step away from this car. You let me and the old woman drive away right now. In exchange, I will go straight to the county office. I will access the primary server, and I will permanently delete the entire recording. I will say nothing to the police, and will tell the agency she had a medical emergency, and I brought her to the hospital. You go back to your woods, and nobody ever comes looking for you." The daughter looked back at me. Her expression was deeply annoyed. The skin around her eyes tightened, a genuine, ugly display of frustration. "You will erase the record," she stated, confirming the terms. "I will erase it from the main server." I promised. The grandson stepped back from the window. "We accept the deal. But understand this. We will watch, and we will make sure you commit to it. If the record is seen, we will find you. We have a deal," I said. They turned and walked away from the car, moving to the edge of the dirt road. Without a single sound, they leaped upward, disappearing effortlessly into the thick, dark canopy of the forest above. I did not wait to see if they would come back down. I rolled the window up, hit the accelerator, and drove the rest of the way to the main highway at dangerous speeds. I drove straight to the county general hospital, then carried the old woman into the emergency room and handed her over to the medical staff. I told the attending physician I found her in a state of severe neglect and that she required immediate protective custody. Then, I drove to my agency office. I went directly to the IT department and invoked a critical HIPAA privacy violation. I told the administrator on duty that my dash camera had inadvertently recorded a highly sensitive, unclothed medical emergency during my wellness check, and that the footage was currently sitting on the main server. The threat of a massive county lawsuit made him panic. He logged into the secure terminal and gave me the keyboard to locate and wipe the specific file to contain the breach. I deleted the primary video from the network, exactly as we agreed. But I made a hard copy first, saving it to my own encrypted flash drive right before hitting the delete key. I am writing this now, sitting in my locked apartment, keeping the lights on. I am leaving this story here as a dead man's switch. If they are watching, if they are tracking my digital footprint to ensure I keep my end of the bargain, I want them to read this very carefully. I kept the video. I kept a record of the address. If I see you standing in the tree line outside my window, or if you ever try to pull another vulnerable person out of this county, I will publish the evidence of your existence to every network on this planet. Stay in the woods. I work for a third-party call center that operates out of a long shut-down department store in a walled-off section of a half-shuttered mall. The windows are all boarded up, and we have to use the metal doors in the back. We handle customer service for multiple businesses, so 1 minute I could be helping a woman reboot her Wi-Fi, and the second that call ends, I mean that literally, I will be helping a man reschedule his refrigerator delivery. If there is one saving grace to this job, it's the variety. For many, though, that isn't enough to make up for the fact that we only get a 15-minute lunch and a cumulative 10-minute break time, including bathroom breaks. You want to make sure you use it because it can't be carried over to the next shift, but you get written up for going over the allotted break time. Turnover was so bad that experienced reps were spending more time training new reps than taking calls. Management started calling it a measurable loss of productivity. One co-worker of mine, Sharon, sort of acts as our de facto HR. The branch can't even hold a legitimate HR employee, which should tell you a lot. Sharon's a middle-aged woman who used to work in social work, but this unfortunately paid better. A few weeks ago, she took it upon herself to fix the turnover problem. Her solution? A compliment jar where we write nice things about one another, and once a week, Sharon opens and reads them to everyone during the shift. She hoped that it would boost morale and get employees talking to one another outside the confines of work. Everyone groaned at the idea of another task to complete for the week, but she assured us that participation was encouraged but not at all mandatory. She just wanted everyone's hard work to be seen. At the end of the first week of her new experiment, Sharon gathered us all around and stood behind her desk. She reached her hand into the jar and pulled out the first folded-up strip of paper and read it aloud. Tim is always patient with the assholes. I wasn't really sure who Tim was, and by the squeaking chairs and silence, I don't think many of us did. Someone finally broke the silence with a little clap. No one knew how to act after each compliment was read aloud, but in the end, we resorted to half-assed clapping between compliments like, "Alice makes the best coffee in the break room. Thank you, Emma, for fixing my headset. If you need to troubleshoot a TV, you can always count on Blake." People didn't really know how to act when their names were called either. Some stayed in their seats, others stood and gave an awkward wave to the crowd of colleagues. The whole thing seemed performative to me at the time, and I thought this would die out quickly. Sharon always took the jar home with her in the evening. A few days after the first reading, Sharon walked past my desk with the jar tucked under her arm. "Bill, how do you think this is going?" I looked around at the busy office, and then back to Sharon. "Well, no one is crying." She laughed. "I know all of this is corny," she said. "People are miserable here. We get screamed at for 8 hours, then we go home and worry about the next day, wondering if anyone would notice if we didn't come back. Management would notice, only if the call queue backs up. You think this will fix that?" I asked as I pointed to the jar. There was no way in hell this office could keep that going. She shrugged. Maybe it will get people to at least look at each other. By the next reading, I thought I was right when the first few were basically just praise for always being on time for work. It looked like the compliments were getting lazier. We had already run out of nice things to say to one another, and we were just grasping at straws to find something to add. Then there was, "If you think you're on a tough call, just look over at Josh." That one got a laugh out of me, because Josh always seems stressed out of his mind. After that, more ended up being funny. "Madison, I love how your chair squeaks in rhythm with the hold music when you need a little break on the line." Sharon seemed so proud because it seemed this initiative was actually going to take off. To her credit, it really did seem like the office was a brighter place. There were more conversations between people on their breaks, and just a lighter general mood in the office. Over the next week, I found some of the conversations at work to be extremely awkward, but it was better than before. Anything was better than nothing. On Wednesday, David came up to me while I was getting a cup of coffee that Alice had brewed for everyone. "Are you having to leave home earlier to get here on time?" I finished my sip, cleared my throat, and asked, "I'm sorry? I mean, with all that road work on Laurel Street. Do you have to leave for work earlier?" Now, I know I didn't tell him where I lived. I only knew his name was David because he had a tag with his name on his cubicle. But the road work 2 streets down did delay me, and it was extremely annoying. "Yeah, do you live around there too?" "No, just read about it in the paper." David was a strange guy. Maybe I had mentioned my street before. The 3rd week, Sharon confidently announced the reading of the compliments. As she unfolded the first sliver of paper, she paused, furrowed her brow, and then chuckled before reading. "I'm happy that Alice got her oil changed over the weekend." That sound was really starting to bother me. The regular clapping commenced as Sharon looked up at the crowd. "Is that an inside joke or something?" No one responded, so she continued. "Tim, your son really seemed to enjoy the clown at the birthday party last week." "Elizabeth, your stylist was so right to suggest that color. I am so happy you changed your mind in the chair. Blue curtains were the way to go, Alex. Much better than the green, especially with that rug. We gotta talk about the new bedspread, though." Each one Sharon tried to laugh off. "I am so happy that this has led to some after-hours friendships." Sharon pulled the next slip and hesitated as she skimmed it. She frowned as she stared at the slip, looked up at the crowd in disbelief, and then back at the paper in her hand. "Tage, this one is just for me," she said. Annoyed sighs filled the room as she searched for the next compliment. When my name was called, I was jolted to attention. "Bill, I love how you are so careful when you water the tomatoes in your vegetable garden. I think spraying some cayenne pepper and water on it all will work better than the chicken wire." My fingers became numb, and my chest felt hollow. I have never spoken to anyone here about my garden, and I have never posted about it anywhere. At the end of the reading, as everyone was rolling or shuffling back to their cubicles, Sharon tried to raise her voice above the noise. "From now on, let's try to keep these workplace appropriate." On my way home, I checked my mirrors for anyone following me. I checked my fence for cameras or loose boards. Nothing. I monitored the jar this whole week, and I saw no one put in a compliment. But every morning there are a few more in the jar. I wasn't the only one shaken by an intrusive message. The office has been quieter. People are hiding their phones and closing laptops as others walk by. There's less bathroom traffic, and people are taking fewer breaks than ever before. I even noticed a few people driving different cars to work than I had remembered. It can't be just one person. I have my suspicions about a few. Of course, there was David. He knew where I lived somehow. Then there was Sharon. She always took the jar home with her. The only other weird conversation was with Ted, who told me that he thought peppers would grow better in my garden. When I asked if he was the one who left me the compliment, he laughed it off. "No, I just heard about the tomatoes, and I thought we were in more of a pepper climate, that's all." I tried to talk to Alice when I saw her at the vending machine, staring at the rows of snacks, deciding what was going to get her through the rest of the afternoon. "You know this isn't normal, right?" I said. She tapped her card on the machine and began to punch in her numbers. "The compliments," I continued. "You've heard it, the curtains, your oil change, my garden. People are following each other." Her snack fell. As she bent down to retrieve it, she whispered, "Don't." "Don't what?" She stood up and looked at me, her eyes darting to mine, and then past me and back. "Don't make people think I'm talking to you about this." "Alice, please," she said, "don't make it worse for me." That afternoon, I caught Blake following me. I pulled into my driveway, parked, and got out of my car. He pulled in, and then began to back up like he was just using it to turn around. I motioned for him to roll down his window and yelled, "Blake, what the hell?" He rolled down his window an inch as he pulled off and yelled. I was just trying to find something nice to say. I was dumbfounded. Did he really think that was appropriate? The day before the next reading, I decided to write my first real compliment. I wanted to prove a point. I folded it and dropped it into the jar. "Blake," I wrote, "I love how determined you are to find compliments, even if you will follow people home to do it." I thought it would be read, and everyone would understand how out of hand this had gotten. That night I got a call from Sharon. "Hello." "Hey Bill." She was keeping her voice low. "I know you're upset, but you can't start writing stuff like that." "Sharon," Blake followed me home. He He said he just wanted to find something to put in the compliment jar. This has gotten out of hand. I'm trying to stop this. That's what everyone says. You need to stop this. After a few seconds of silence, Sharon said, I want a bill, but the regional office won't let me. They want to implement jars in other locations. Productivity has spiked at our branch, and turnover is almost non-existent. But, Bill, listen, I have the jar at my house, and I am screening all the slips. You got one. And it says, Bill, I love how you inspected your fence the other day. It's important to take pride in what we have. I can't remember the rest of the conversation. I just stopped listening to what I was hearing and prepared for the next day. I actually drafted this last night, talking about how I wasn't going to go to readings anymore just to avoid the whole thing, but I decided not to send it. I didn't want to give them anything for today's reading. This morning, I walked into work, and everyone was already sitting, chairs pushed together in anticipation like they were pigs at a trough. Smiles on their faces. Sharon began with, I asked us to keep things workplace appropriate. I went through all of these last night. Other than a few complimenting others on their new cars, I can't read any of these. Some booed, and a few stood and shouted that she was censoring our positivity. Sharon argued for a bit with the crowd and began to step away from the desk. As she did, Madison pulled the jar from her and took Sharon's place. Sharon kept walking out the door. Madison began, You were so brave deleting their number, Emma. Even if you did end up putting it back in your phone later on. Josh practiced the best apology in his car before he went inside the apartment. Madison, I think it is so sweet that you still sleep on your husband's side of the bed. Guys, that is so sweet. Thank you for thinking of me. She continued, and I was happy to see we were almost finished. Madison went to put the lid back on the jar. Oops, found a couple of stragglers. Sharon, you were so brave to leave before we were finished. I love how much faith you have in your brakes. Silence. I noticed some people glancing toward the metal doors. Others looked around, taking note of who seemed most uncomfortable. Okay, everyone, last one for the week. Madison said, Bill, I love how you still think strangers can help even when Sharon can't. Some laughed and cheered while others simply watched me. I'm not sure if all this time their cheers are for the recipient or for the writer. I'm back home from my shift. I saw a strip of paper caught in my chicken wire. I bent down and grabbed it. Bill, I love how careful you are about locking your door. Most people forget the kitchen window. I looked up at my window and saw the blinds move. I ran inside to find Blake in my kitchen. He looked embarrassed, like I had caught him stealing copy paper again. Get out of my house. He smiled and said, Your voice carries so well. I stepped towards him, and he stepped towards the door. Excellent posture, he said, very protective of your property. He slipped out the door. As he walked off, he looked over his shoulder and said, See, plenty of nice things to say. I can't decide what to do. I can't get a hold of Sharon. Her phone is going straight to voicemail now. And if anyone from work is here reading this, I guess I should add a compliment. Sharon, thank you for the compliment jar. I know you just wanted to help. Morale has never been higher.